Welcome everyone out to our virtual board meeting tonight. We'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and that will be offered by my daughter, Madison Kloss. Here, Madison.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madison. Hey, can all the board members hear me all right? All right, perfect.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
All right, and just give me one moment, please. Teresa is on telephonically. Oh, there you are, Miss Phillips. You found a place to join us.
We made it.
I did.
Excellent. All right.
I did. I don't know that my audio works very well.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, Ms. Namika?
Mr. Clausen.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch.
Aye.
Mr. Clausen, would you like to take the roll? Would you like me to take roll?
Please.
Okay. Mr. Clausen.
Here.
Ms. Phillips.
Here?
Mr. Schwartz.
Here.
Mr. Taylor.
Here.
Ms. Upchurch.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Namika. Okay, the public comment guidelines pursuant to board policy BEDH, public participation at school board meetings. There is one time for public comment and it is limited to 30 minutes. In an effort to allow all who wish to speak, the amount of time dedicated to each speaker will be dependent upon the number of people who sign up, with the entire public comment period not exceeding 30 minutes. If 10 people or fewer sign up, each person will have 3 minutes to address the board. During the meetings held through electronic participation only, members of the public shall be allowed to address the board by sending written comments to the secretary to the board at knamika@lewispalmer.org, identifying the subject public comment in the subject line of the email. Comments must be received by 12 noon the day prior to the meeting. Written comments must be no more than 400 words, approximately 3 minutes. Must clearly identify the submitter by name and must not contain any profanity, must not reference student names, and must not defame any individuals by name. Public comments that do not abide by these guidelines will not be shared publicly. The board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operation of the schools. We believe that public comments that are critical to district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and to the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticisms of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff, and then involving board members as necessary. If you choose instead to address personnel issues publicly, please understand the board does not endorse these comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event the affected employees believe that any comments about them violate legal standards. Lastly, please keep in mind we may have K through 12 students in the audience. Please keep all comments appropriate for our audience. All right. And Ms. Namika, I believe that we have 2 public comments. Would you please read those to the board?
Certainly. Our first comment is from April Villay. And she says, "Good evening. My name is April and I am the mom of 3 kiddos at Palmer Lake Elementary. This school has been our home for 7 years now. We love the community, its people, teachers, and generally all that this little school at the foot of the star has to offer. I would like to let you know how important it is to me that our children return to in-person learning in August. Please fight with the powers that be, whomever they are, the Colorado Department of Education, etc., for our kids. Our children are not the quote-unquote target of this novel virus. The statistics are proving to be extremely positive in all our favor, and our children are strong. We have a small team of parents discussing a plan to deep clean a little more often, as it became apparent that this was something that was not done in a regular fashion and depended more on whom your teacher was versus a procedure. This would help in general, not due to just coronavirus. We have discussed sanitizer stations and no community supply buckets, but overall kids build immunity in school, right? If the discussion continues regarding modified school, I would like to know why. What is driving the discussion? It sure is not stats. Fear, control, the difficult task of fighting the Main Street thought. Protecting our teachers is important. Maybe a poll can be done about their thoughts if it hasn't already. Please, please be a leader in this fight. Maybe we can be the example, like Sweden, in what trying something different looks like. Our kids need us to fight for them and their normal. Parents need the same too. I know we are a creative group. Let us figure a way that works for the Tri-Lakes area families. Kindly, April. And our second comment is from Ande Lawson. And she simply writes, please open the schools for our children next fall. My 3 boys are dearly missing school.
Thank you, Ms. Namika. Now we'll proceed with board member comments, and we'll go ahead and start with Ms. Upchurch.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Good evening, everyone. I guess I'd start by saying that so as our students are going into finishing checking out, this is our last week, I'm confident that no one predicted that this is how our year would end. And my heart, and I'm sure all of us, are with our students who miss their teachers and miss their peers. And our hearts are with our teachers who miss their students. It's my opinion, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this opinion, that our teachers are the #1 resource for our students. And so as we move forward in navigating uncertain times and uncertain decisions that have to be made and tough decisions that have to be made, I find myself having to check my own emotions in feeling for our seniors who are moving on to colleges and careers and service, and that as they move on, they're missing parts of celebrations that they looked forward to. But I'm also confident that these are the students that will be resilient, and their tenacity will make them fantastic leaders. And I actually have confidence that our future's in good hands with these students. So I just want to say congratulations to all of our students that are moving on. And I also want to send a shout out to all of our teachers that have inspired all of these students as they move on. I'm sure all of us can remember that one teacher in our life that impacted us and made a difference. Mine was, I can remember my senior English teacher at Palmer High School, who taught me to always ask, so what, now what? And to be creative and think outside the box. And he inspired me to pursue avenues in education. So these are the folks that when our students are gone, they will remember our students, and our students will remember them for a long time, and that the impact that they've made on these students is a legacy. So I want to make sure that we're taking care of that legacy. And I guess that's all I have to say for tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Upchurch. Ms. Phillips?
Matt, I'm going to pass on my board comments because I'm having technical difficulties and I'm quite remote.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Phillips. Mr. Taylor?
We do live in unprecedented times, but the more data that is released, I saw a graph the other day that said that the risk of death for those under 60 is no greater than the common flu. And so, as data continues to come out, I hope that our political leaders recognize the reality of the situation and not let this become a political football. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. I was having a technical challenge finding the unmute button. My apologies. It's an intellectual stretch for a guy like me. I'd like to continue the tradition we began in highlighting one of our schools each time I have an opportunity to do some board member comments. This month, I'd like to highlight Lewis Palmer Elementary School. And really, this story is not purely about the daily magic that happens in our classrooms, but it's really about innovation and some of the things that they're doing to not let the pandemic get in the way of their students, their staff, and their mutual success. A couple examples I've got for all the folks on this call are Miss Eversole figured out a great way to continue a long honored tradition at that school called the annual talent show. And she actually put it together with video and was able to share it with families who often can't be there to see it because of their work schedules. And it went off really well, and it helped the kids transition from in-person learning to remote. And it allowed them to keep that time-honored tradition intact and even have the staff do their piece, which is always silly fun and creates a peer moment with their students. Additionally, their instructional coach at LPS, Ms. Kern, created something completely unique to keep people highly engaged in this time of online learning. And she created the Oscar Awards for her fellow peer teachers. And they all really stepped up in terms of their adoption of the technologies and tools and competed to win this award. And it really helped them not just to recognize extraordinary efforts, but to put some fun into some of the stress that goes with these changes. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, Ms. Day, who's the principal at this school, has been very fortunate to receive numerous emails, nearly all complimentary, about the work that's being done on a daily basis between the teachers and the students and how they're innovating to make sure that all the students get their due in terms of teacher time and face time. And I'll just read one quick excerpt, and we're leaving names of students out for obvious reasons. My student is sweet, smart, curious, and a creative kid, but he tries to get by with minimal efforts. And I say this with all the love in the world, while being fully aware that nobody is perfect. Ms. Viney, who's his teacher, doesn't accept minimal efforts for him and insists on having him do his best. She's patient with him, gives freely of her time, and makes sure he understands the assignments and concepts. Before remote learning was the norm, she tutored him after school to help him fill the gaps, to make sure that he was keeping up with the curriculum here in Colorado. She's the best of everything it means to be a teacher. And I just thought somebody should know. I will end it there, but kudos to Ms. Day and your team for your innovation and not letting a pandemic get in the way of your team and your student success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I want to thank my fellow board members, and I concur with their comments. I saw a post on social media that maybe our high school graduation should take place in a Lowe's, a Walmart, or Home Depot, and the parents could stand up and down the lines and congratulate their kids as they walk through. And I think that's kind of indicative of the times that we're dealing with, that there's so many restrictions on our kids, but other aspects of our community and economy seem to be going all right. But with that being said, the safety and well-being of our kids and students are always paramount in everything that we do. I had the privilege of sitting in on a couple concluding comments from teachers today.
one of which was Miss Schindel. And I'm paraphrasing her words. She said that, these are crazy times, but take the opportunity to learn from them, learn something good that will make you a better person and a better student. And I thought those words were very insightful. I believe that all kids that have experienced this have learned a different aspect of learning. And with that being said, I sincerely hope that we're able to open the doors in the fall and have classes as normal. I also want to thank our teachers and the rest of the D38 team. I know there is some anxiety about financial issues that may come to the board. As one board member, I am committed to our students. I believe that every student deserves a top-rate education. And as one board member, I'm going to do everything within my power to keep the cuts away from our classrooms, because our greatest commodity are our teachers, and our greatest future is that of our students. So with that being said, Dr. Summers, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Thank you, board, for your comments. Thank you also for your support. We would not be able to navigate through these challenging times without all of us working together and doing our part. And obviously our staff, including all the work of our students, our parents, our entire community, has demonstrated what it takes to rise to the challenge and has done a fantastic job with that. And as alluded to earlier, the fact that we are having to end the year on this type of note is certainly not what any of us envisioned, but having the opportunity to see some of what is happening as we're wrapping up these last few days in an effort to celebrate the experiences, celebrate the moments and the memories that we've been able to develop over the course of the year. And certainly from the standpoint of supporting our seniors in our class of 2020 as they are moving on to the next stage of their life, we are thinking about all of you, and just can't say enough about all the great work that's taken place over the past few weeks in a situation that was certainly thrust upon every one of us. I do have a few comments related to a couple of topics that I know we'll spend a little bit of time on as we're going through the rest of the meeting, but I think they're probably best or most appropriately placed here at this time. We launched a thought exchange survey that went out a little over a week ago, and it was specific to our efforts toward fall planning. And specifically, we were hoping to hear thoughts and questions and ideas around needed supports. And there were definitely multiple themes that emerged, but there's a few that I think rose to the top. Starting with, and I'll just share some of these comments, our teachers did an amazing job. That was the highest rated comment across the board. And adding to that, wanting to make sure that whatever happens, our teachers feel supported. Several thoughts about the potential budget impacts and making sure that we are mindful of everything that our teachers are doing, that we certainly do not want to see any issues around layoffs. Teacher salaries should not be cut. They're working hard to make things work, and they care about our kids. Several thoughts around that, and even an overarching question around how we can support our teachers in all of this. Our teachers are our heroes and our rock stars, and I think that goes to the same point that we have a staff that is highly dedicated, highly committed to doing everything that we can to support our kids at this time. Definitely themes around stress, stress of parents teaching, working, and kids' social isolation from friends, that's not healthy. Certainly there's concerns around child mental health and the negative impacts that are associated with a break from the normal routine and the pattern that they're comfortable with. And a recognition that our kids need to be in a normal routine with their friends and faces they recognize, and how too much isolation can be detrimental. And certainly a lot of thoughts around wanting to return to school as fully as possible, knowing that safety is definitely of concern, but that we are addressing issues around mental health and making sure that we're doing what we can to return within the guidelines that we are being presented with right now. To that point, I would recommend that we spend a little bit more time talking through the particulars of this at our upcoming June work session. I'm proud to share that D38 is going to be joining a regional consortium with 5 other area districts, including districts 2, 3, 8, 11, and 20. We're going to be engaging in a systemic development, validation, and implementation of fall contingency plans as we work through the summer. That will launch on June 1st. We're looking forward to having 4 work groups that are going to be organized around our instructional core and social emotional learning, resource allocation, operations, and stakeholder involvement. And so that will be something that we will continue to update our community on and seek their feedback around as we're working into the first few weeks of the summer, and then preparing for more of a fall implementation when we come back this August. We will be coming back. We just don't know exactly how all of that is going to transpire quite yet. So obviously that is something that will require a lot of effort, capacity, and to be able to do that with other districts in our area collaboratively and strategically, I think will prove to be very fruitful as we're developing those plans. Few updates also regarding graduation. Last Friday, El Paso County's variance for graduation was approved by our governor, which was excellent news. And so we are currently awaiting our specific site plans to be approved at the county level. Hopefully that will happen here in the next few days. And we're looking forward to those June 11th and 12th graduations for Palmer Ridge High School and Lewis Palmer High School, respectively, keeping in mind that this is not exactly how we envisioned those things happening. Certainly it hurts us that our families won't be able to be as part of a live audience. That said, I think it also is the best we can do under this circumstance and within the guidelines that have been set forth. So the fact that we'll still be able to have that formal type of ceremony for our kids, we are feeling optimistic about. Also, just on that note, May 20th, so this is tomorrow evening, beginning at 8:20 or 2020 military time, there will be a community-wide effort across the Colorado Springs area and region to brighten the night. So we encourage everyone to honor and celebrate graduating seniors from high schools, as well as colleges and universities all across our community. The last update that I had for you this evening is really one that came to us late yesterday evening, and even right before this board meeting, I just got another email, and it probably situates somewhere along the lines of our conversations around budget. But there is an update that we received around Governor Polis announcing yesterday evening that there will be $510 million that will be allocated to K-12 education via the CARES Act. So these funds are going to be distributed to all districts in the state on a per pupil basis. The details of how those funds can be utilized include the following guidance. These are funds that can only be used for COVID-19 related expenses. So it's not so much to backfill budgetary shortages, but those expenses are also expenses that have occurred between March 1st and December 30th of 2020. So we must expend those funds no later than the end of this upcoming not fiscal year, but calendar year, excuse me. And then we need to make sure that we are providing notice of award to CDE, Colorado Department of Education, within 2 weeks of receiving these funds, which my understanding right now is we should be receiving those by the end of the week. So we're still awaiting additional information and guidance in the coming days, but I know one of the questions is going to come to how much is that amount? And based on the email that I just alluded to prior to jumping onto this meeting, as best I can ascertain from a spreadsheet that was just sent, we're looking at a prorated share in Lewis Palmer 38 of about 2.576 million. There's a per pupil implementation funding dollar amount of, I believe, $395.34. So that is something that obviously will be part of some additional conversation as we make those decisions related to the expenditures of those funds. But I wanted to lift that up not only for our board, but our community as a function of continuing to share information as it's coming hot off the press. So with that said, appreciate the time and looking forward to the rest of our meeting.
Sorry about that. Our next agenda item is a Monument Academy update.
All right, this is Mark McWilliams, president of the MA board, and I don't have video, but that's all right, because I'm just right now going to introduce Amy Clody, and I believe we have Brian Elio on, and Kurt may be on as well, but love for them to take a minute and just kind of give a quick update on where we are with the construction of the new building.
Hey everybody, this is Amy. I'm the Senior Project Manager for JHL Constructors. We are in a really good spot for the building. Even after all the weather days we had, even after we had a couple of COVID incidents on our project, we are still looking to turn this project over middle of August in the time frame that we originally proposed. Which is just awesome. It's really exciting to see that we're actually hitting our dates and we're making up time. Right now, if you just as for just kind of overall what's going on with the schedule, we've got the elevator installing. We have drywall going in. The painters are on site. Ceiling tile is going to start going in. We're going to really start getting into finishes. The lockers are going to go in this week. We're going to start doing all of our site finishes. They're going to start up probably this week. We are working with Monument Academy on some additional site accessories that they want, some basketball courts and maybe some turf field and stuff like that. And their contingency is looking well so that we have some funds available for them to start kind of picking through and getting some additional things for their school. But all in all, I got to tell you, we're really happy where we are in the schedule, and everything really looks great out there. Brian, Elio, you want to make any comments about the direction?
Well, we've just been working with, y'all can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We've been working with the PE teacher and the athletic director to develop some of the outdoor areas, outdoor areas for play and for recreation, basketball courts, things like that, a turf area. I was on site today, actually, and architecturally, I'm pretty happy with it. The spaces are turning out really nice. The finishes are turning out really nice. All the changes we made during construction, I think are going to be a huge benefit to the school.
I totally agree. This is Mark again. The project is looking fantastic. I'd encourage you all to schedule a time with the team there, and you can go through Amy on that, to come out and see the property. We do, because of COVID restrictions, have to keep it to 2 people at a time and schedule it ahead of time, but we'd love to have you guys come out and do a walk around on it as this thing's getting better and better. I was hoping to have given you some up-to-date drone pictures, but unfortunately the wind has been preventing that here over the last few days. But the important items to note is that we have signed, or I'll say this, I'm signing tomorrow the agreed development plan with the county. All of those agreements have been made. Everything is moving forward there. We're working closely with CDOT, and our TIS has been approved, as well as the changes that we're doing for Highway 83 and Hodgin interchange. All of those things are coming along great. The concerns before regarding the roads and the water on site are now resolved. They have the Dunstan group, their team has really kicked it into high gear here as soon as the weather got better and they aren't trying to crack through frozen ground. They are really moving along all the way up through and coming down toward the school. They have closed that, they'll have that loop closed for the water by mid-June. And we're expecting the roads to begin here in the next week, that they'll be moving dirt for that. So everything has come along very, very well. Any questions I can answer?
I have one. Hi, Mark. It's Ron Schwartz. How are you?
Good, Ron. Thank you.
So on the, it's great news. Congratulations to you and the entire team for making wonderful progress and being on time and likely on budget. When the term turnover of the school in mid-August, how does that relate to when you'd like to have your instructors in there and then obviously students to begin teaching?
Christiana, do you want to answer that one?
Hello, yes, I'm Christiana Herrera here. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Monument Academy, and I hope you're having a wonderful evening. Yes, so we are looking at ideally, we will do our teacher training at our current campus, and then we'll look at moving over. We've been looking at different moving scenarios as far as even having, containers on site where we can house our furniture and then move them in pretty quickly as soon as we receive that certificate of occupancy. We ideally would like a 2-week turnaround for that. That is how much time we'd originally anticipated. We are also just in case things go, awry, or we lose some days in the future, and that 2-week window starts to shorten, then we are looking at, we will need to have a full force to move those desks into classrooms pretty quickly so that we can start on time. But we do expect to do what we need to do in order to get everything done and have it be a go from day one. Obviously, our contingency plans would be then to start at our current campus. The nice thing about both our campuses and that we have a high school rollout is that if we are able to start at both campuses, we do have lots of room because we're expecting to add classes to our high school as the years progress. And so we would much rather, with the current COVID situations and planning that we're already starting for next school year, have those 2 facilities in place so that we have lots of room for our planning and social distancing. But if need be, then we would be looking at utilizing classroom space, teachers sharing rooms, so to speak, so that we have students in classrooms receiving instructions, but teachers may need to travel. That's what we'd look to do first before we started looking at needing to put down, modular units and such. With such a close turnaround and start, and plan to where we are originally starting school, we believe that we can start on time, even if we're still putting up our decorations and posters, within those first weeks.
Is there an actual turnover date on the calendar as well as an actual first instruction day date already?
Yes, our school calendar was approved for August 29th. And so we are looking at that 2-week. We are looking at a turnover around the 15th of August. If we receive that, if we receive the building by the 24th of August, we'll still be able to move in time. Great. Okay, having said that, if there aren't any further questions about the building and the construction, I'd like to move into, staffing and programming and answering some of your questions there, give you a brief update, if that's permissible. Okay. All right. Thank you to all who gave the construction update. We do also have Kurt O'Connelly on the line as well as far as any of the budget issues. He's here with Mark Barklehurst, our financial director, who will also be able to talk to you about what we've been budgeting for and how that's impacting our program going into next year. So we have put a hiring freeze on all new hires, and so that did affect some positions that we were looking at as far as assistant principals, another assistant facilities director, so that we would have a director, a facilities director on each campus, and so more of those auxiliary administration. That's where we look to put a hold and to make those cuts. Our attention has been that with an approved budget of a 10% reduction in revenue as to what we received this year, that we wanted to make sure that we maintained our programs and our teachers as well as possible, that they did not see the impact, and that we really limited that impact to to the periphery and to the administration. So what that looks like is going into next school year for the high school, we have hired an excellent, amazing Latin teacher, and she will also be teaching some history as well as some middle school Latin to give her a full schedule. We've identified that out of 23 middle school teachers, 21 of them are qualified for teaching high school. And we also have administrators who are able, and we definitely have some subject matter specialties that we have passion for. So we've been building our schedule accordingly. Mrs. Seymour, who's our middle and high school principal, and she's on the line here too to answer any questions you might have. She is planning on teaching a science class. I'm planning on teaching a language arts and composition, so that our ninth grade students will receive a robust, enriched educational offering from the faculty that we do have. Okay. All right. And then I did also want to roll that conversation into the how many students do we currently have and how many on our wait list. And I know that we did receive some documentation on this, and I just wanted to explain it a little bit because our letters of intent received is how we track our wait list numbers. And what that indicates is parents who've put their child on our list and indicated an interest in having their children attend our school. Since this started, we do have open seats and we have a wait list. So that means that we have families who could take open seats but are not yet. We have 196 on that wait list currently. And a lot of this is, as we've been investigating and questioning, is that one, parents are either happy where they're at, that this is not a time to make a huge change, especially a change in schools, and two, that they are waiting for a chance to be able to have a face-to-face with us and tour the building and meet the administration as well as the faculty and the teachers. And so we will be conducting virtual meetings throughout the summer, but we will also be looking forward to the day that we can do this in person and allow our parents and our students back into our facility so that they can see what our program looks like in a more personable manner. So our total enrolled for next school year is 1,028 students total. All right. And do you have I answered all of your questions? Is there more information that I can provide? And we have a variety of Monument Academy representatives here who are eager to speak with you. I don't want to take too much of your time if I've answered your questions or if you have specific questions that you'd like to ask us.
I do have one question. I received a text message from a fellow board member that's having some communication issues, and they asked if you could clarify the high school only open as ninth grade as written in your enrollment chart submitted this week.
Okay, so we were, as you know, anticipating opening a 9th and 10th grade going into the next school year. We do not have enough enrollment or interest for that 10th grade class. So that is why we are starting with the 9th grade only.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Christiana and Mark and team, this is Tiffany. I really appreciate when I've been attending your board meetings, the thoroughness of the reports that have been coming about from the progress with the school and from Ms. Seymour and your entire crew and the enthusiasm and energy that you guys have been putting into this going forward. And with everybody's in these uncertain times, it's not just one family or one person, it's everybody sharing this. So I just want to say thank you for being welcoming and reaching out to your families as well.
We love having you there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have to thank you for attending our meetings. This is not, a global health crisis that we asked for or anticipated. We are navigating uncharted territory here, and we're making the best decisions that we can given the information that we have at the time. And of course, our families and our students deserve for us to now take these summer weeks and really plan out a full scope scenario for them. But having said that, I have been absolutely grateful, and never more so than when you have a crisis, is to be a part of this district. I thank you and I thank our entire district for their collaboration with us, that we are solely focused on taking care of our students and the students in our community. And I have a lot of thank yous. So, but we have just, you really start to recognize the heroes that stand beside you when we face times like these. And your presence in our meetings has been invaluable as well, just to give voice to that bigger picture, and to realize that we're not in this alone, that we care deeply for the children in our communities. And being a part of this district and being a part of your team as well has been very beneficial for us. I've been in leadership meetings and town halls and meetings with other charter schools who are really struggling, and if you don't have that strong relationship and that support, it makes a huge difference. And so for that, I thank you. Yeah. Okay, I do believe that there was a question about just how we were handling our scheduling and our curricular and our courses. Would you like me to answer some of those, or could we provide information outside of this meeting? Mrs. Seymour is here to speak to that if you'd like to hear about it.
Christina, I just have one additional question. This is also from a fellow board member that's having technical difficulties. According to the contract, the wait list will be finalized by May 31st. Is that accurate?
Could you clarify the question?
I'm just reading the question. So the wait list that you just referenced, it is the understanding of one board member that will be finalized by May 31st. Is that accurate?
I don't understand what you're asking, because when we have students or parents who are submitting letters of intent, and we're offering seats, so that's why it's an interesting scenario, because if you have open seats, we're going to offer the seats, and so now it's those parents that you see who are who have to make the choice whether or not to take the open seat. So as far as the wait list is to, we don't have placement for you, and this is the amount of students within and families within our community that could, that could join our school and can until there's an open seat. So I think there's probably a definition of wait list that's confusing.
Okay. All right, perfect. So let me ask it another way. And once again, I'm not sure that I'm conveying the right question. So let me try it a different way. When will you finalize the wait list? In other words, the person that people that have a letter of intent or a wait list, when will you actually finalize those two lists to determine how many kids will be attending Monument Academy?
So we're able to continue to enroll until count day, really. Yep. And so we're looking at it as we have, we're not going over the amount of students that we were anticipating having those classes. And that's, we have open seating in those classes currently. If we have student or parents who are indicating that they have an interest in our school and then accept enrollment, then we'll move them into those open seats. I think the wait list truly comes into play is when we don't have seats available, and then we have to start looking at if a seat does become available, how do we offer that? And that starts to look at a lottery system. And that is where we need to cooperate with the district, because if we were to conduct a lottery, the district needs to be present with that, and there is a specific protocol. And that's just to be fair to those who also want that opportunity after we're starting to open one by one seating, but because we do have open seating, it's that moving target. And honestly, I think it's really just people who are on pause and considering these students that we're really talking about are coming from outside of district lines and are looking to choice in from other districts. So within that internal movement, I know that we work very closely with the district as to how that works.
Perfect. Thank you for your response.
Sure, I hope I answered it. Thank you.
All right. Are there any additional questions for the Monument Academy team? I'm not hearing anything, so thank you all for joining us, and we appreciate the great work that you do for our kids.
As do we you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Appreciated the chance to have a talk with you this evening and to be included in your board meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bear with me for a moment, please. All right, next agenda item is the 2021 preliminary budget. And Mr. Cruz, I believe we'll turn a few minutes over to you, Summers. Feel free to interject as you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Yeah, what I'd like to do is go through the budget summary that Vicky's put up on the screen here, add a few points to that, and then answer any questions that you have. Right now, the 2021 budget was developed knowing the certain facts and making certain assumptions based on information available at the time of the preparation. So at the time of the preparation, we had an enrollment base of 6,481 and an uncertainty of when our revenue or how much revenue we will receive. So these facts and assumptions are as follows. The budget that we created for this year or for next year is $54,732,551 compared to last year's budget of actual and projected, which was at $60,329,235. So you have a difference there of 5.596 in that, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit as we go through this, but that's coming from our a reduction in revenue that we anticipate. So the fiscal year 2021 budget is aligned with the district's and the Board of Education's goals, the federal and state spending requirements with TABOR, the state fund balance requirements, tying our expenditures and our revenues together. And again, like I said, Colorado hasn't determined the amount of funding for our K-12 education system right now. The budget's been prepared on basically a worst case scenario, the lowest, as we talked in our last meeting, to create a budget that is at the floor as far as funding goes per child. And so that floor for us, that we can't go any lower unless there were some legislative changes, is a 14% reduction in revenue. And that equates to a $6,952 amount per child in the FTE formula. So giving that, if you compare that to last year, that was an $8,079 amount. So you can see the difference and you can anticipate the reductions that we have. So like I said, the base funding, which is the amount of money a school district receives per qualified student before the additional added specific factors, those factors like free and reduced or living or size increases at risk, those pieces are included in that. But this 6952 is a floor amount prior to any of those formulated pieces to that. We still are planning to receive our additional $4 million that's provided in our mill levy override from 1999. Some of the things that we have that are new expenses for us, our retirement is going up from a 20.4. Our retirement match as an employer is going up from a 20.4% to a 20.9% starting July 1st. And then also our health insurance cost increased 4.5%. And both of those, the district's planning will absorb. The district expects the enrollment FT to decrease by approximately 36 students, as I talked about earlier. That was the current enrollment that we had when we were working on, that is the current enrollment that we had based on FTE. That isn't our total population, because that's not, our preschool is not included in that number. And some of our homeschool students are counted as half-time there. So yeah, 36 different from last October count, which was 6517. So yeah, 36 down. Actual funding to the district is primarily based on funding pupil counts, which we're going to establish in October. So we will come back with a revised budget if the numbers show a dramatic decrease or a dramatic increase that may affect our revenue. And this year, that would be something that we need to look at for sure. Our expenditure estimates were based on our program needs, enrollment projections, federal and state mandatory requirements, contractual relationships, our salaries and benefits, and our anticipated changes in economic conditions. What we did in this budget was create a salary amount that we remained frozen, remained flat. Based on the anticipated revenue reductions, there are no increases to not only the salaries, but also movements across in education for our certified staff. That is not in the, that remained as something we're not going to consider for this year initially. And then the rest of it is the food service does provide some revenue. They are self-funded. And so they return or transfer back 115,000. We'll continue to do that for the cost of utility and maintenance. And that's the summary for the budget that you received. We will be putting this on the website either probably tomorrow. And so that provides an opportunity for our public to take a look at our expenditures and our anticipated revenue at this time. Thank you.
Before we open it up to questions, I just want to reemphasize what you just articulated, that there are so many variables. This is kind of the worst case scenario that you anticipated. And would this worst case scenario also contemplate perhaps even rescissions that we might see from funding from Denver next year?
Yeah, we haven't had that discussion yet, Mr. Clausen, but that's an anticipated piece to that. You know, I would assume it's hard to comment on that. I mean, if we're at a base funding initially to ask the district for an additional rescission off of that, that's quite a hardship. So okay. It'll be interesting to hear that. Dr. Summers, have you heard anything on rescissions or?
No, what we continue to hear is prepare for the worst and understanding that this will have a multi-year impact. This is not something that we're necessarily going to be able to just navigate our way through in 1 year. To be fair to the decision makers and the powers that be at this point, they are doing their best, I think, to provide as much information that creates an opportunity for districts to make this actionable as we brace ourselves for what the immediate impacts are as we go into next year, with an understanding that there's still a lot of uncertainty that we're trying to address going into the second year and even third year of how this will ripple effect through all of our systems. So with that said, I would say right now we've not heard that, but there's the potential of some type of rescission just based on how long this goes and how long it takes for our economy to recover.
Thank you for the answer. What questions do you have for Mr. Cruz or Dr. Summers?
Mr. Cruz, this quick question. Can you clarify, did you say that right now this freezes salaries, but we're making it a priority to try to not cut salaries?
Yeah, at this time, the budget is based off of the salaries that teachers and our classified employees and our support staff made last year. One of the anticipated costs on an employee is though that the PERA that's coming back, the match that they have to make as an employee is increasing from 8.75 to 10%, at least 10%, starting July 1st. So right there, the pay that they receive will be a little bit less than what they are receiving right now, even though everything is remaining flat.
The other thing I would add to that, Ms. Upchurch and other board members, is we did not feel comfortable at the time of publishing this draft budget making a decision about any potential salary impact or positional impact at this time. As we've done an initial scrub of quite a bit of what we're looking at, starting with our central office and to different programs and different services that we have traditionally or historically budgeted for. We've found close to $1.3 million that we are confident in our ability to pull that back from our traditional expenditures as we're going into next year. But that 1.3 still yields about 5.5 million of additional expenditures that we need to identify within the budget, assuming the 15% loss of revenue. So I think that again becomes the sticking point. Is we don't want to be in a position where we're having to cut any more than we absolutely have to. And until we know exactly what that dollar amount is from the state, what we're really doing right now is playing a little bit of a guessing game and playing out these different scenarios. So while that's definitely cause for a lot of uncertainty and anxiety, the thing that we would emphasize at this point is until we know for sure exactly what we're coming out with in terms of that state level impact, that we've got some different thoughts about that. And obviously there's a lot of conversation still to be had with the board in regards to where we might be able to come up with some of that shortfall. And I know one of the conversations we'll have in that process is how much would we feel confident and strategic about in dipping into reserves in order to offset some of what those cuts may look like. So I think those are still some of the conversations that we need to make sure that we're bracing ourselves for.
Right, Mr. Cruz, can I ask you 3 more questions? This is also from a board member that's having technical difficulties. Question 1, do you know how long food service department has been self-funded? Question 2, has it always been that way or has it occurred over a period of time? Question 3, and are there other departments in the district that are fully self-funded?
So our food service is our only department that is self-funded. Historically, I don't know if Mr. Foster could maybe answer that for me, but I know that it has been that way for a while. Is he on? Do you know, Bob?
And yes, it has been historically the only department that is self-funded. Has been so for, I believe, I would hazard a guess at least the 5 to 8 year mark there that it was self-funded. I do believe during the recession it did have to be propped up, but it's the only revenue generating portion or department really.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Mr. Cruz, I have a question.
Yes.
So first of all, thanks to you and your team and Marcy and Kevin for all the sweat equity into trying to put together a model when you have so many variables changing. We appreciate having a foundational outline with which to work from so that we can make decisions that are in the best interest of the students and the staff and their longevity and success. On a macro basis, for the folks on the call, I believe there's about 50 people that are not district-related employees on the call. The numbers that we began the budget with, the 60 million from the current year and the 55 54 million for the year upcoming. Am I correct in understanding if we pull out the budget stabilization factor, the net of that subtraction is really the money that the district has to utilize to conduct operations?
Yeah, it's pretty close as far as that's where that difference is, because right now the expenditures are about, except for what Dr. Summers talked about, some of the scrubbing that we're doing is about the same as for last year, right? But our revenue is not. So that's reflected in that difference between the 54 and the 60 is that revenue shift. And that's that anticipated budget stabilization reduction that we possibly could have. Right now, worst case, close to that $7 million mark. Hopefully it'll be a lot less than that. But again, we're just we're in that wait and see mode right now. So I think it was better to start with as well as the board making that suggestion, to start very conservative, have some of those hard discussions that we're having right now and be able to pull back from them instead of starting at a softer pace and then having to go harder. So I think it's challenging, but I would like to say there's some very highly qualified or high quality discussions that we're having with that.
If I may re-ask the question, I'm not sure I understand the answer. As we look forward to the upcoming school year, is 54 million the net amount that we're planning that we're going to have to spend, or is there also a budget stabilization factor that will take out another amount and reduce it?
That 54 million number is reflected in the expenditure amount and our reserves. And so when the comparison is what we budgeted for and what our reserves were last year to what we budgeted for next year and what our planned reserves will be. That difference is that $5.8 million or $5.5 million number that we have there.
Okay,
so I know I'm not. So it's a little bit different than what you're saying there.
So the 54.7 is a proposed net expense to run the operation.
With our reserves in there.
The revenue is going to be versus the previous fiscal year.
Yeah, the revenue change that we're anticipating right now is about a $7 million, $7.3, $7.4 million.
What was the net revenue for the current fiscal year? So we can kind of so that the public that's on the call can understand the magnitude of the delta that we're looking at.
So the net revenue that we received this last year, is that what you're asking?
Versus the net revenue we're expecting in the upcoming fiscal year.
I can get that.
Just round numbers.
61 million, down to 53 million.
Okay.
Sorry, Dave, I just already had it up.
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
And is that pre or post stabilization factor?
That is post.
Okay.
Yep.
We're looking at about an $8.5 million impact, which includes the budget stabilization factor.
Right. So 8 on 60 is pushing 14, 15%, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So that piece is important for the public to understand. Second piece is the per pupil funding level, looking forward at $6,952 for the upcoming school and fiscal year, correct?
Yes.
And that's an expense piece, not a revenue piece, correct? The budget.
Well, you're multiplying that out by your student enrollment.
Right. So it's an expense number, not a revenue number.
I see it as a revenue number unless I'm missing something there. Because that's the amount of money that we're going to be receiving from the state, which equates equates to that $45 million number. That's before our reserves that we added into it. We take that. Go ahead, Mr. Swartz.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is there a legal baseline that we can't go under? And if so, how close are we to it with the 6952?
We're there. We're at the floor.
Okay.
We can't go any further than that unless there are legislative changes, right?
Okay. Okay. So at least for planning purposes, we know it can't go any lower. Yeah.
Yes.
That's how we built. Yeah, that's how we built this whole premise behind this draft.
Yeah.
Is best case scenario, we're coming back with somewhere in the neighborhood of some less than 12% revenue loss.
Right. So the reason and thank you for taking the pain to go through this. The reason I wanted to highlight it is it's important for our stakeholders and the community and the owners of our school system to understand that through no fault of theirs, the revenues in the state have gone down so significantly that we are now operating on a baseline number. And that,
yes,
as Mr. Clausen so aptly said at the beginning, we intend to do it. We intend to execute on our mission of continuing to provide excellent quality and safe education for our kids and a great working environment for our staff. So we're going to make lemonade out of this thing. Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
All right, are there any additional questions for Mr. Cruz?
I had a couple questions real quick. So I too wanted to make sure it's understood that when I'm looking through this book, and folks that aren't on the board or may not know, so when you look at, for example, the Colorado preschool program, that's earmarked funds that come from the state. That's not per pupil funding that we can put anywhere else. That's that Colorado preschool program. And I use that just as an example that there are funds in here that must be spent in a certain way. And so that can't be considered part of our revenue source. It applies towards those students, but it doesn't apply towards curriculum for middle school, for example. So I just wanted to, I think that when we're looking at that, I think it's important that we're letting folks know that as we're going through this, to reiterate what Mr. Schwartz said, in that as we're going through this process, making sure that our stakeholders understand clearly what we're looking at, how the decisions are being made, and what decisions are being made, and so that there's the confidence knowing that we're doing, well, I kind of like what you said, making lemonade out of lemons, for a better term. But I just wanted to point that out. And when we're looking, I also noticed that our property tax mills for the 2020 year are, that you pointed out, that's 41.43 mills coming into next year, right? Is that the way I read this, Mr. Cruz?
Yes.
And that it's gone down from, say, last year it was 44.651.
Then, yeah, that number includes our mill levy override. That includes our program funding as well as our bond. That's a total amount that we collect, and that's
Sure.
based off assessed valuation increasing.
Right. I think that's what it's important to understand for folks is how the Gallagher Amendment plays into this. When houses are being built, property taxes are down, but we still get the same revenue. Our revenue doesn't change based on the houses that come in. It affects the homeowner or the business owner, but we're still looking at the same revenue stream that comes in, and then the state, whatever the property taxes come in, say it's a $500,000 home and you times it times 7.1, which is Gallagher, and this year's 41.43 mills. Folks' personal property taxes went down for the school district. Now, if I'm explaining this correctly, and please stop me if I'm incorrect, that the property tax values went up from the county, but the district doesn't see additional funds for that, right?
Well, it depends on yes. When you're looking at our program funding, so the difference that we may see a little bit of an increase in local amount that we receive locally, which would be maybe a 14% or something, not a 14%, but a little bit higher in the state equalization, a little bit less in the state equalization, a little bit higher in the local amount for program funding based on that assessed valuation change. But you're right, as far as the Gallagher, right now as we're talking, there hasn't not been a change. There's been some adjustment in that 7% tax, and that'll continue with that for the following year. So your assessed valuation's going up, and you're also spreading that through more people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so so whatever we bring in the state, that's just less that the state backfills.
Exactly.
But if we go into a depression, for example, and those assessed value goes down, that's there. Only through Tabor, there's no way to bounce back. We can only go down, but it cannot go back up.
Yeah, it's that ratcheting down effect. And so when that continues and you only have a certain amount that you can collect, then you're going to have to, again, backfill more and a higher amount through your state equalization or through your state funding.
Okay.
Which right now we're at a critical point, right? And so, yeah.
So that might be a good opportunity to bring up another point of discussion related to among the many conversations that are taking place right now at the state level. There is a conversation about the residential assessment rate through Gallagher dropping down to 5.88 beginning the 21-22 year, which, as I'm reading this, would mean a $490 million drop in all district revenues and a $203 million drop in revenues for counties. So keeping in mind that the state does not have the revenue to backfill K-12, which means that the budget stabilization factor over time increases. What we're hearing in that conversation is that there may be a legislative resolution to be introduced that repeals some sections of Colorado Constitution related to Gallagher Amendment. So the resolution in draft format currently would remove the mandated 45 to 55 ratio percentage between personal and business property, remove the requirement of the General Assembly to establish the residential assessment rate, and also remove the historical rate of 21% on personal residences. All that to say, just to give you an understanding of what could be additional revenue loss that we're going to need to account for. The amount that is currently being projected for Lewis Palmer School District would be potential of 3.2 million additional revenue loss. So stay tuned on that. That's going to be something that I think we'll get some better direction on as all of this is being discussed as the General Assembly reconvenes.
Dr. Summers, quick clarification question on that part.
Sure.
How does that relate to the baseline funding that we just briefly spoke about? Is it, will it move that funding, that baseline number down, or can they not? So it has a potential to move it down.
Yes, because total program funding is a function of, first, how much we're raising through local property taxes, and then as a result of how the School Finance Act is approved, our ability to have the additional dollars that are coming from the state would be reflected in that overall revenue loss, because we're not bringing in as much through that total program formula.
May I ask a question to build on what Tiffany was saying about property taxes?
Please.
So it's my understanding that the property tax goes directly to the state, except for the only monies that we get from the property tax is the 99 MLO, which is $4 million. That comes directly to the district. Otherwise, all the property taxes go to the state, and then they pay out on their PPR, whatever.
As part of that total program formula. Yeah.
I thought that was different because that property tax doesn't just pay for the school. I mean, 60% of it goes to education. I think it's about 60%. I could be wrong. And then the rest of it goes to our local fire districts, our local.
Yeah, I was only talking about the school district portion of our property tax.
I thought it was the same as our other municipalities as far as property taxes. I thought that the state just.
Well, that's why I was asking that clarifying question, because I had a different understanding. So, David or Casey, my understanding is that regardless of the mill levies, the only property taxes that really stay in the school district are the $4 million from the MLO. All the other property taxes related to the school district go to the state, and then we get a PPR based on some algorithm they have for distributing funds throughout all the school districts.
Dave, you want to go or do you want me to?
Well, I'll take a stab at it.
Go for it.
As far as if we're looking at, yes, the money goes to the state, and we get it all. I mean, we get it sent over. We get it sent back to us by the state, but it is broken down into a certain percentage that we receive. I think it's like a $13 or $14 million amount that we receive, and that's specific in that formula that says we receive that through our local taxes. The remaining amount is from the sales tax, from all the statewide tax that we receive, and then that is also added into that amount. And I think that, again, I'm off the top of my head, it was around a $30-something million amount, and you added those together along with this.
So David, the point still is that we don't keep any of the property tax funds except the $4 million. The rest of it goes to the state, and based on their algorithms, they return it. And they may break it down as, here's a return of your sales or your property tax and whatever else they do, but it goes to the state. The state controls the PPR.
It does control it.
The state sets that PPR amount. So, Chris, I don't know if it actually is a check that is cut just from the state. Dave, is that the total PPR dollar amount that's coming to us, and then they just tell us how much of that is coming from local property taxes?
That money, exactly. But that money comes directly into our CSIP account, our investment account, and from there we transfer that money.
Right.
But that also includes our $4 million.
It also includes some specific ownership taxes.
Wait, so David, you actually give the state the $4 million as well?
Yeah, the mill levy override money is included, not in the formula as far as identifying your PPOR, but as far as a lump sum of money that we receive monthly, it all comes from the state.
So all of the property taxes that you collect go to the state, and then they do give us back away from, over and above the PPR, $4 million from the MLO.
Yes.
Okay, good. That was my understanding. I just wanted to clarify that, Tiffany. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. And before I ask the questions, I'm going to make a statement of some observations. So for the last 3 years, we've been living in a booming economy. A booming economy was defined as somewhere between 2 and 4% GDP growth. For the second quarter of 2020, the current estimate is a 36 to 40% GDP loss. So the shutdown is going to have a depression-like effect on this economy. The concern I have is that a V shape? Is it a U shape? Or is it a check mark that goes way out to the right? No, I don't know that anybody knows that. The proposed budget that you delivered and prepared, and I appreciate very much all the effort that's gone into it, relies almost exclusively. I heard you say that you found $1.2 million to cut in spending. But then the other $5.4 million is currently, as it's proposed, taking those monies from our reserves, which have been built up over the last 10 years. When I when I ran for this office, my hope was that I would leave the school district better off than I found it. This budget will undermine that goal. We spoke in our work session about furlough days. Furlough days are about 200 to 210,000 savings. 2 weeks of furlough would be just over $2 million. Now, nobody likes to have these conversations, but you know what? In the real world, people are trying to survive. It isn't a matter of thriving. It isn't a matter of, it's a reality we live in. A lot of people are losing their jobs. So, you know, while I agree it's kids first and it's teachers first, I am so reluctant to support a budget that utilizes our reserves for this 1 year without even looking the next 2 years at a minimum, and have some idea, something that would say, here's our budget assumptions. Based on that, when are the real cuts coming? Are we going to just wait 1 year? Because that's sort of what this budget does. Is, yeah, I get the idea of a haircut, but that's not the time that we're living in. So, you know, I don't know that I'm asking a question more than I'm just making a statement here that this is hard. I essentially, during the work session, a special session occurred right thereafter, and we essentially said we'll spend over $600,000, but we didn't consider the fact that, is that going to mean 3 furlough days? I mean, what do we give up when we spend money? These are scarce resources that even Dr. Summers just said it might even be worse than we know. So since we have limited funding, you guys want to spend all your reserves in 1 year? And I hope not. And I'm not saying these things because I have any emotion about it, but let's be real. We're in a depression. We cannot safely say what next year is going to be like or the year beyond. And for us to spend our entire savings account seems to be very short-sighted, in my opinion. I'll just leave it at that.
Can I make one more statement? I guess it's a question. When I'm looking at this, was Chris's assessment that we were looking at tapping into all of our reserves this year an accurate assessment? Or were we looking at making sure that we have enough funds to get us through the next few years?
This proposed budget is not it. I think the best way to answer it is because we have yet to account for additional reductions and where that might be coming from, partly because we're also trying to understand exactly how far we need to cut, as well as every other variable that we're trying to address, including this 2.5 million that we just learned about an hour ago. We're not implying that that is the best way to go forward. That's just what is left to account for. So that's a decision that needs to be made. And that's a decision that we want to make sure that we are having thoughtful conversation about, that we're involving some input from both our internal and external stakeholders on, and it's still work that needs to be done. So I would only caution from the standpoint that we are not suggesting that this is how it lives or this is what we're providing to you as our recommendation per se. It's really just the fact that there's more work to do. And I would also add in that process, this is unprecedented from the standpoint of the timing of how many really difficult decisions we have to make in such a short amount of time, that we do want to look at this from a multi-year impact. That's something that we'd be happy to provide more assumptions or more context around to help address that decision-making process. But it's really a function of our best guess. So as we know exactly how much we're going to have to cut, that should help inform us where else do we want to find reductions to expenditures to make that actually happen. And I think you make an excellent point, Mr. Taylor. I don't think anyone's trying to say that that's the only way to go at it. That's just where we left it based on the fact that we are doing everything that we can within the short, limited time that we have to be able to produce a finalized budget as we're going into next year, keeping in mind there's a lot more to have to determine as we go into year 2 and year 3 of this and the ripple effects.
Thank you, Dr. Summers. Might I try and clarify that answer to Tiffany's question about are we utilizing all of the reserves in 1 year? The reserve that I understand is we're talking about, is it the 12 million or is it 16 million? What is the general reserve number?
After the expenditures in this budget?
No, at the beginning of the year.
We based it off real close to a fund balance of 13 million.
Okay, so 13 million. And out of 13 million, what's the general requirement based on Tabor? And I think it's a 7.5% of revenue guideline from the state.
Our policy says that 16.67 number, which Tabor includes in that.
Well, that's our policy, but I read somewhere that it was closer to 7.5% based on state requirements. So if you took the 7.5% of our revenue, what's that number?
Projected based on our projected revenue for this year?
Yeah.
And is that including the Tabor or is that on top of the Tabor? Mr.
Just let's use that number for discussion.
7%.
So our revenue's 42,
3.71. No, we're basing off of 53.
Okay, so 3.71 million is the minimum we need to have. So if you take the minimum, and I'm not saying that is, but for discussion, let's just say it's 4 million. So we got to have 4 million. We have 13, I heard, and about 5 of that is right now in the budget as presented, the proposed budget as presented. We're going to use just over 5 million of that. So we're going to be down to 8 million, and we still have a cushion of 4, but that's my point right there. Did that help, Tiffany?
Yeah, it did. Because if I might be so bold as to express my thoughts and priority on this, is I don't want us to be where the state is. And I read that the state's struggling with their rainy day fund, that part of the problem is that they just don't have enough funding. It's, yes, there's the tax cuts, but they didn't have a cushion to bounce back and handle this with all the priorities. So it is important to me that we are not stuck in that situation either, because I think that personally, I think that we're going to see this isn't going to be a 1 year, one and done financial impact. I think we're going to be seeing this for several years. So I want to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And if I also might be as bold as to say that I think I've not made it any secret that what's important to me when I look at this is when we're making cuts, that our cuts have the least impact on our students in our classrooms. And obviously our teachers are first and foremost one of our number one resources to our kids. But so my personal thoughts when I look through this is, what can we do that has the least impact on our students? For example, I don't need to go to a CASB. I know that's only, when you're looking at a budget this large, obviously a CASB attendance is maybe small, but every little bit here and there helps. So I want to make sure, and I know that you are all being very mindful and thoughtful when you're putting this together, and I really appreciate that, because it is important to me that our cuts are coming from as many areas that don't include the impact to our kids as possible. Does that make sense?
It does. Casey and David, I don't know if you've done any surveys inside the district, but I would be curious to know of the teachers and staff, when we talk about furlough days, it's a day off without pay. And 2 weeks furlough time is about $2 million, or just over $2 million. And I'd be really curious to know if the entire school district could weigh in on, would you rather take some days off, or should we cut roles? maybe we need some more information from the school district about everyone's feelings around that. You told us last time, Dr. Summers, that you would try and schedule those during the summer months or when it is least impactful to the education model. And nobody likes to take a 2-week cut and pay. I get this, but I think that's one of the hard questions we need to be asking ourselves.
So to that point, Mr. Taylor, we have elected at this point to postpone administering a survey for as long as possible, from the standpoint that we are trying to provide as much clarity in what we're asking our staff as possible. So what my hope would be is, rather than just say, how do you feel about it, that we can give our staff an opportunity to weigh in on exactly what type of an amount of cut are we talking, whether it be through furlough or a salary reduction, versus how many staff we may be having to look at making a reduction to. Because I think when you just throw it out there as an open-ended, how do you feel about this, there's a point where that may not be as actionable of feedback as we'd like it to be. So while that has put our staff in a difficult place in terms of them wanting to tell us exactly how they feel, I can tell you this: a lot of our staff are saying we have gone through several years of reductions or freezes or areas where we have been not compensated in a manner that is commensurate with other districts in the area, or what really demonstrates the value that our staff have. So that, in other words, they've taken a lot of hit over a lot of years. So I think anyone looking at it right now has not only that perspective of the historical context, but also understanding how difficult these times are. I think our staff also appreciate the fact that we're going to try to do everything we possibly can to minimize that impact, minimize the disruption. The difficult thing, as we know, is when 85% of our budget is tied up in our people, there's only so many places that we can go before we ultimately have that type of an impact. So all that to say is we are planning on administering that survey in as focused and as concrete a manner as possible in the coming days, coming weeks, and that will help inform final decisions so that the board has a good understanding of exactly what that feedback tells us.
Thank you. And in all due respect, though, I trust that you would do that anyway. But more importantly, there was a frozen pay plan that was put in place during the Great Recession. But I also know that the board over the years has tried to make that right. So I hear what you're saying, but to be fair, the board did all they could to make those prior actions correct. And in fact, I know for a fact that 2 years ago, we finally got even again. And so this current salary structure that's in place right now has not been affected by past actions, because those were resolved in those subsequent years. And I understand
completely fair point. Yep.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of people losing their jobs. This is a really hard time in this world. I don't think we have a clue yet what's going to happen. If schools don't start up, this economy as a whole is in big trouble. And, I don't want to pay any property taxes to anyone who's not providing services. I don't want to. I mean, this is going to get ugly before it gets better, in my opinion. And we haven't seen all the ripple effects of political causes that will be thrown into the mix. So I'm just saying, we got some work to do. And I'm not saying I'm rejecting the proposal. I'm just saying, as it's proposed, I think we need to look a lot harder.
We agree.
Chris, I appreciate your insight. My time on the board, I've said numerous times that we need to plan for another economic downturn. I always have the philosophy, hope for the best, plan for the worst. And I think as a board, we need to plan on 3 to 5 years. And we need to plan on being very judicious with what, if any, money we pull out of the reserves.
And I think we also need to look at making more of the programs that we have for our students cost neutral. I know cutting salaries or furloughs is the easy and quickest option, but the bottom line is we live in a very affluent community, and there's a lot of resources out there. And for us to continue to maintain the level of activities and so forth, we need to look at all options, including the options that to make sure that they at least pay for themselves, that they're cost neutral. So, there's a lot of ideas, and this discussion could go for quite some time, but I think we're all on the same page that we want to protect the reserves, and we want to do what we can to minimize the cuts in the classroom. Okay. Is there any additional discussion on this topic before we move on?
Mr. Clausen, I do have one question, not so much on this discussion, but a question for Mr. Cruz on the report itself. As I'm looking through under the tab for general fund, where it has your spreadsheet, the general fund spreadsheet, and I was noticing the budget assumptions with the funded pupil count, assessed valuation. I didn't know if this is a typo where it says override mill levy, and then it says the 2019-2020 projected, and it has 0. Is that just a typo?
Which one is that, Tiffany? Which chart?
So this is under general fund, and it's after the pie charts that show the transfers to other funds, expenditures, so on and so forth. And it has the very first spreadsheet.
Okay.
Where it's it's the first subject of the override mill levy. It says 2019-2020 budget of 6.759.
Oh, yes.
And that's mills. And then I understand that it's 6.757 mills for the 2020-2021 budget, but the 2019-2020 projected column has 0. And
You're right.
There's a reason, or if it's a typo.
No, what it should have been just adjusted from the projected onto the left. We just need to put that in there. We'll do that. Thanks, Tiffany.
Okay. I figured, I was like, that's got to be a typo.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. And with that being said, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next agenda item? I'd like to make a motion to approve the changes to policies JICDA, Code of Conduct, JII, Concerns and Complaints, and JKD/JKE, Suspension, Expulsion of Students, as presented.
Second.
Questions, comments, concerns?
I always do. Mr. Foster, this comes from legislature, right?
The two changes to the JKD, JKE, and JICDA, the discipline policies, yes, that is a change in legislative thing. The change to JII puts a time limiter on that for the correct resolution or a resolution to complaints. There is no timeline stated in law, but it makes it hard to handle a complaint from 2 years ago when it's brought forth 24 months after the initial date.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, Ms. Namika?
Mr. Clausen.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to the next agenda item, is there any questions regarding enrollment data? Okay. Next agenda item, any questions regarding financial impact data? Okay. Dr. Benton, We'll have you speak on multiple pathways update.
Great, thank you. I see Vicki is pulling up the slides. Really quickly want to go through the first couple of slides. I just tried to give you a general update on a variety of programs that we have put in place in the last 4 years. So the programs that you see are all secondary programs, and majority of them focus on high school students. And just to get to a little bit of the why, so Vicki, if you just keep moving forward, thank you. Basically tell you why we're here, what the updates are, and where we plan to head with our programming. So these are obviously aligned to both when we began this work 4 years ago to our altitude framework, and completely and totally align as well to our new district strategic plan, and each component listed in the goal about ensuring high quality instruction and relevant educational experiences for all students obviously meet each of these pieces. So just quickly, a historical perspective on secondary programming. We started looking at our post-secondary data, placement data through the National Student Clearinghouse. And what we realized was that we had a gap of students who we had no data on what they were doing post-secondary. And it was about a 20% gap at the time who were not accessing 2 or 4 year colleges or universities or some sort of industrial programming. It's really hard for us to track military enlistment because we cannot get that data from the military, but we do use self-report data. And the percentages aren't as high as maybe what most people might think in terms of direct enlistment into the military from high school. So we asked ourselves, well, we're a really good traditional school district. We prepare students for very traditional pathways, but obviously that's not meeting the needs of all of our students. And so we thought, well, let's go upstream and figure out how we can work at the middle school and high school level to be able to provide flexibility so that students have multiple pathways, that it's not just planning for a 2 or 4 year college. And so what I have in front of you, and you can look through some of the notes and that sort of thing, is just a quick update on our CTE programming. And CTE stands, it's Career and Technical Ed. I did include the definition. And you can see that it's an emphasis on basically what we call PWR. You know, we love our acronyms in education. And so it's post-secondary and workforce readiness competencies, technical skills, and transition into further education or employment. And the idea is that we want very agile students to be able to launch into a career or college and not be limited with that choice once they graduate from high school. The next slide just goes through some current numbers. In the last 4 years, we've increased the number of programs that are considered CTE, and the T is the important part there, because many of the programs that you see are extremely technical. And most of what we're preparing our students for a 21st century work environment are very technical skills. And so everything from our marketing, accounting classes, everything has software, has access to programming. We've added for this next year a cyber program. We're looking to add that. We've also added a manufacturing program, believe it or not, and it's a tie between the Home Builders Association and our geometry and construction course pathway. So it meets multiple needs for our students, including a geometry credit, as well as an industrial certifications. You can also see on there that we partner with Pikes Peak Community College with their Career Start program, as well as International Salon and Spa Academy for cosmetology certification. We also offer a variety of work study and internship options, which we've expanded significantly since we have been able to count that as actual seat time. We used to not be able to count work study, believe it or not, as seat time, and now the state does allow us to do so. So it gives us much greater flexibility to meet the needs of students who are able to work. You can see that we've increased the number of students in our programs, and as a result, between our number of students or teachers, those who are credentialed or certified, Vicki, you can go to that next slide, we've also increased the amount of funding that we receive as reimbursement. These are reimbursement grants, and they are, Perkins is a federal grant that is tied to the number of students that we have who are free and reduced lunch. But CTA is part of a Colorado initiative to support career and technical education. And it is a year in arrears type reimbursement funding. So we submit a variety of expenditures that meet certain requirements, and we get a percentage back from the state through the CTA, or the Career and Technical Act. And as you can see, we've increased the reimbursement that we've been able to get each year. And that offsets some of the costs to run programs. In terms of what's next for CTE, Vicki, if you want to go to the next slide. There is a huge focus now on work-based learning opportunities. And so this is the continuum of work-based learning that we hope we have our students in our CTE programs be able to experience. So the learning about work occurs in our middle school and early high school years. And then as they matriculate through into 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, we are working to the on-the-job training and employment opportunities for students. We do a lot of this partnership through the Pikes Peak Business and Education Alliance. Believe it or not, that is something that we as a district helped to create this last year. And this is the first full year of implementation of the PPBEA. If you click on the slide, hopefully it'll take you, and you don't need to do that, Vicki, but hopefully the link, the hyperlink translated, it takes you to the marketplace, which is where businesses, teachers, and students can access resources for that work-based learning continuum.
Dr. Benton, may
yes.
I interrupt you right there?
Sure.
Dr. Summers talked earlier about a coalition of school districts, and he's going to share more information. I'm curious about, does this group of districts correlate well with what Dr. Summers mentioned earlier?
Yes, so the Academy, I believe, there were Shine Mountain, Fountain Fort Carson, Widefield, I believe, and a handful of other districts that are partnering in that endeavor. Yes.
It's just to be clear, districts 2, 3, 8, 11, 20, and I might be missing one other, and ourselves.
Thank you.
So what's next? We're looking at propping up what's called an ACE program, and that is a program that helps support students with on-the-job training and learning who are some of our students with disabilities. And so that would be a partnership. Rick and I have talked through that, and it would include our transition program as well as students at LPHS and Palmer Ridge High School. So we're excited to support the development of another program. We continue to find staff and work with staff to get them credentialed, because that's actually a great way for us to claim for reimbursement is a portion of their salary and benefits. We continue to partner with PPBEA to be able to offer internships as well as work-based learning opportunities. We are the first district that partnered with PPBEA to offer internships so that we had a model for PPBEA. Tri-Lakes Cares also was the first nonprofit to offer internships to all students that were in PPBEA as a nonprofit, and had out-of-district students apply, which was pretty cool, because that's the point, is not to have those boundaries. So we want to continue to expand opportunities for all students to access those internships. And we are in the process. There was a new federal legislation around the reauthorization of Perkins. And so as anytime there's reauthorization of legislation, we're required to change some of what we do. And so you'll be seeing some of those changes come through as information items or consent agenda items in the next 6 months. But we're working, we get to revise every single program, which is a great opportunity for us to make sure we have exactly what we want within our CTE pathways. The next program is concurrent enrollment. There is legislation that requires that we offer concurrent enrollment, but we believe that it is a great opportunity to springboard students into whatever's next, whether that's career or college. And we know that if a student accesses a minimum of 9 hours of college coursework, whether that's AP equivalent or through credentialing, that they are more likely to be economically viable long-term. And it's the equivalent now in 2020 as what a high school diploma was in 1970. And so it's basically an economic leveler for students long-term. So there's a definition of what concurrent enrollment actually is. It gets confused a lot with a variety of other terminology, including dual enrollment. Concurrent enrollment that we're talking about here is post-secondary education that students at high school access. So it's provided by a Pikes Peak or UCCS professor. The way that we get funding for this is it is a different funding allocation, but it is also through per pupil count. And so students who are either part-time or full-time enrolled in concurrent enrollment are funded in that manner. In the slide presentation, I also had linked in that first slide kind of how we determine who counts for what in terms of enrollment. And that's our guide that we use with students. As you can see, some of the different courses that we offer, all of our Career Start programs are in partnership with Pikes Peak Community College and are considered college classes that count towards credentialed programs for students, as well as count towards an Associate of Applied Science. So we have some students who will access the program for 2 years and be able to be within a few hours of earning an associate's degree. We do offer this year on-site courses, meaning we bring in Pikes Peak professors and they teach our students on-site at either one of the high schools. We are looking at adding a math 107 as well as a 121 for this next year. And you can see by us adding on-site courses that it's also helped increase our enrollment in concurrent enrollment, which helps students. These are all what we call guaranteed transfer courses. And those are important because they're guaranteed to transfer within any 2-year or 4-year public institution in Colorado. And the next couple of slides are just showing some projections of the number of hours taken and what we're projecting in terms of student access moving forward for both on-site as well as additional courses in terms of total number of hours off-site as well. Built into this is an ask. We're always looking for different revenue sources, and one is through grants. And so this is just a real quick information item that we are looking to purchase resources to help support students to be able to access these on-site classes. The Math 107 and Math 120 texts are extremely expensive, and so we're looking to be able to offset those costs to be able to purchase those for students and basically rent them to them. And then English 121 would love to be able to have some dedicated devices. So like I said, it is a grant. And if the grants open back up from the state, we would love to apply for this. The last part of concurrent enrollment is called ASCENT. And ASCENT stands for Accelerating Students Through Concurrent Enrollment. And historically as a district, we did not participate in ASCENT. ASCENT counted against your graduation rate, and ASCENT was a heavy lift because at the time, many of the students, we didn't have students who would qualify. When they changed the rules of who could qualify for ASCENT, as well as that students could count as graduates within their class, even though they don't earn the diploma officially until the following year, we were able to convince students to want to do that. And we know that ASCENT offers a higher likelihood for students who participate to enroll in college, to continue on. We know that we have some students that would qualify for potentially Pell Grants and that sort of thing, but are hesitant to be able to do that. And this also allows some of our students to complete that post-secondary credential I was talking about around the Pikes Peak Community College. If they take the 2-year course track, they can add that 3rd year and then get an associate's degree. So we believe that this is another pathway, and the next slide shows you who is eligible. The other game changer for us is that we could count scores for AP. So we have a large percentage of our students who access AP, and there's a translation of number of hours based on the score a student receives. And with that, we were able to have a much higher number of students who would be eligible for ASCENT funding. You can also see the other requirements there. So how is ASCENT funded? It is funded through state funding, and it's basically like a PPR funding model. It tells you right there it's about $7,000 a student, so it's not actually the same as our per pupil revenue, but it is a per pupil dollar amount that is set through the long bill. The students do have to apply for the COF first, so it's tuition less the COF. And you might say, well, gosh, how many students are getting to take advantage of this? Well, it's a competitive process, and every year we apply for slots. We ask for 10, and you can see that we got 3 the first year and 4 this last year, and 2020 slots have not been awarded, but we're hoping for at least 4 or more. So that's 4 more students who get to access college and get to continue on their journey. So as I said, our next step is to continue to try and grow our slot allocation as well as refine the process for our students to apply. Online programming. So we do have CDE credentialed high school and middle school online programming so that a student's attendance in our online program counts for student count, and it is funded that way. We do offer asynchronous learning for students, so not synchronous, meaning at the same time, but asynchronous learning options. We continue to develop our own high school courses, and what's really, really cool, and it's something to celebrate, and I thank Jess McAllister for much of her work on many of these programs, but especially when it comes to this NCAA approval. Our own courses developed by our teachers are NCAA approved. So we have athletes who can access our classes outside of the traditional brick and mortar setting. And we're really proud of that because that's a heavy lift, and most schools rely on outside vendors to provide that. We presented our original pitch for an online program to the school board in 2017. And at the time we did use an outside vendor. And since that time, we have worked to develop our own Lewis Palmer School District courses that are aligned to all of the digital curriculum that has been put in front of the board in the last couple of years. And it allows digital access to text resources. We do use our own learning management system, Canvas, to be able to deliver these courses. So it's very similar to a college experience. Just like a student would see in college in an online course. I linked in the program guide just so you could see what programming looks like for students who select to be a part of our online offerings. And this current year, we expanded to what we call singleton online options. And so as one of the opportunities for our kiddos to take online PE, online yoga, fitness and wellness, or health, we also have students who take what we call consolidated civics, which is a requirement for graduation. So if we have students move in, we can offer that. So they can take brick and mortar classes as well as those singleton online options free to the student. At the middle school level, we also offer part-time and full-time options. And you can see what our enrollment looks like in the last 2 years in terms of the number of courses, but as well as the number of students. And you'll see there is an uptick at the high school level of students choosing to take advantage of those offerings. You can also see what our projections are for next year for online. We're expecting to see an increase significantly at the high school level to access part-time online offerings. So next steps for us include continued development of coursework. So when we put new adoptions in front of the board, it allows us to have digital access to resources so that we can continue to increase flexibility for student offerings. We do integrate those texts into either our Google Waffle or through ClassLink, which is our single sign-on, as well as our LMS options. We're also always looking to pilot new things, and so the next thing up is our next program. So really excited about the Innovative Learning Opportunity Pilot Program. We were contracting with a company to send some students to be able to do kind of a completely different model of learning. It's self-paced and teacher facilitated and allowed students to accelerate some of their learning. And we felt like we could take the resources we were allocating to that program and creatively meet those students' needs on site. And at the same time, believe it or not, the state released a grant and it fit perfectly. And we couldn't have been more excited. So this has been an effort that we started working on last fall. And I did link in the grant application so you could see it, as well as the revised budget based on shifts in funding. But I think the really cool piece of this is that we can take a student's schedule and completely modify it and still receive full-time funding to be able to offset some of the needs that our students have. So you can kind of read through what the intent and purpose of in terms of who's the program designed for. And the answer to that is anyone that needs it. There's 3 main buckets of students that we've designed this program for. One is our Career Start students. And in the past, they would attend their Career Start programming and come back to access 2 brick and mortar classes for us to receive full-time funding for them, whether they needed those credits or not. This allows us much greater flexibility for them to go and do what they need to do to be able to support their learning or to work, and not necessarily have to come back into the building and take brick and mortar classes. And yet we still receive full-time funding for them. The second bucket is our ISSA students, and it's the exact same concept, except instead of them earning college credit, they're in a credentialed program, but yet they were having to come back to access those 2 brick and mortar classes. So this allows greater flexibility for their schedules, as well as not having to sit in a class that they don't necessarily want to have to take. The third bucket, though, is a student who is needing a flexible schedule, who may or may not need to recover some credit, who may desire to be able to launch into the real world, quote, faster. A student who is looking at potentially getting a GED and needs time to prepare for that. So it's a completely flexible option. But the really cool component that we've layered on is a social emotional learning component, where students can get support from a social worker or counselor, work on goal development, work on skills that we call the essential skills. So how self-advocacy, as well as monitor their own academic progress. So each student will have an individualized learning plan that addresses both academic as well as affective goals. Vicki, if you keep going. This is the goal for our program is 60 students, but I think we're going to be able to hit at least 80. And so our funding, the way that we're funding this is through the quote grant. And we're utilizing the expertise of our 2 deans at the high schools. We have 0.3 social workers at each high school assigned to help support the program, as well as 2 part-time teachers to help support students in the learning setting 2 class periods a day. We're also focusing on post-secondary and workforce readiness. So those affective goals, as well as those academic goals, will be tied to whatever they're doing in post-secondary. So as you can see, there's the funding component. As I said, each student is required to attend part-time, but then they qualify for full-time funding. And I did link in that budget narrative to explain how that works. And we are extremely excited to offer another pathway for students. It is a 1-year pilot with the possibility of continued funding based on meeting the grant goals. So what's next for us? Well, plan, and plan some more. So we get to launch this program in the fall. So we are working with Colorado Education Initiative, who is helping to manage the progress monitoring of that grant, to make sure that we're meeting all the benchmarks, because we want to do it right. They're very excited about the program that we have designed, and we get to partner with other districts across the state. There were only 5 recipients for this grant, so we feel pretty fortunate. We will collect and monitor the program data for program effectiveness, and hope that we're worthy of receiving it another year. What questions can I answer for our multiple pathways?
So Dr. Ben, I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
Please, Chris, go ahead and finish. Mine will wait. No worries.
I'm just curious, this is limited to students that live within our boundaries, correct?
Actually, no. The only limitation of everything that's listed is the students have to be to 10 full-time out-of-district resident students for our online program. That's the only out-of-district limitation.
And say that once again, what was that limitation?
So for our online program, as part of the application process, we can only have 10 full-time students who are out-of-district enrolled. We can have as many full-time students as want to access the program.
Well, first, what you presented tonight across the board is really good. I'm really curious about this innovative online learning, because I think our society as a whole is going to see more remote workers as well. And this could, if the limitations aren't in place to prevent it, you could turn that into it sounds like the wrong word, a profit center. You could really open that up statewide or nationally, perhaps. And maybe I'm just way out there in left field, but that's what your presentation made me think about.
And I would tell you that this does two things in terms of multiple pathways. It meets the needs of our students, but it also keeps the learning that we offer viable and relevant.
Dr. Ben,
Sure.
first of all, congratulations to you and your team for your innovation and your capacity to take what we have and make something wonderful with it. Secondly, actually, Ms. Phillips had a question for you, and it was with respect to the beginning of your presentation and post-secondary credits.
Mm-hmm.
Do those credits qualify outside of Colorado?
So we ask students to make sure that they check wherever they are applying, just like with when a student takes an AP exam, and make sure that that transfers. In terms of the guaranteed transfer part, that is by statute that it transfers to 2- and 4-year public Colorado institutions. Beyond that, though, we work with the students to make sure that there's websites where they can check whether or not the courses will transfer, or they contact the colleges of their choice.
Do you have a gut feel for how easy or hard that is to transfer?
Yeah, so gut feel is that, I'll give you an example. If a student wants to go to School of Mines, they're not going to take any engineering or calculus. They're not going to take AP Calc. They're not going to take AP Physics. So they're going to have you take the courses that are within your major. But they might take the English 121 and 122. So part of it is students understanding that taking these courses, it's key that it aligns to their post-secondary plans as best as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions for Dr. Benton? Thank you for your presentation and your remarks this evening, Dr. Benton.
Thank you.
All right, before I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda, are there any questions or comments or discussions that we need to have?
Not for me, thank you.
I do have I have one quick one, Matt.
Sure.
At the risk of dragging things on the curriculum adoption, Mr. Summers or Dr. Summers, sorry, I'm trying to find my agenda right now, so I apologize for being discombobulated. If we adopt that and we find that, yes, I'm bringing it up because we received some communications from teachers that are asking, wanting to make sure that we are taking care of our students and our staff. So if we approve this tonight, is it better to table it until we know what our budget is, or does this? I guess my question is, does this budget conundrum that we're looking at, would it be wise to wait on the purchasing that curriculum, or would it be wiser to just get that done now, but then find? I don't even know the question.
I'm happy to speak to those pieces, Ms. Upchurch. So I think the starting point we have to remember about everything that we have been engaged in with our curriculum adoption process is this has been a multi-step, multi-stage process. And as you know, we've had previous conversations with the board about our recommendations for curriculum adoption. We've followed our process as prescribed by policy. And so this is on the consent agenda because it's really the last step in that equation. I think it's certainly fair to say that we do have staff that are feeling anxious. They're feeling afraid. They respectfully are seeing this issue as a choice of an either or, as in if we vote for this, that actually leads toward the potential of impacts to staff. And I would respectfully say that is not really the situation. This is a dollar amount that was already factored into this current year budget. It's also a need. It's a need that we have had for multiple years. We are behind. Actually, we're significantly behind when it comes to curriculum adoption within our English language arts content area. it's our oldest core adoption. And without going into all the details of everything that this curriculum affords, we believe it is a step in the right direction in terms of relevance, in terms of rigor, in terms of engagement for our kids. And we know that resources are critical to what we do, and making sure that our kids have the right tools and that our staff do as well. So I think what's making this something that's more rising to the surface of concern is that there's obviously conversation about what does it look like for next year in regards to decisions that have yet to be made. I would also say, though, that we are in a position where with some additional information that we are dealing with that I shared earlier tonight, and recognizing that we have different ways, different approaches to how we can still preserve the integrity of what our system requires from a staffing and a compensation mechanism, as well as making sure that our teachers and our kids have the right tools in their hands, that this is not a competing issue. It's one that really warrants the board's careful consideration about everything that we've put into this and making sure that we're able to move forward. So I can't tell you obviously how to vote on that. I'm just telling you that it continues to appear in front of you because it's something that is definitely a need. I will also go on record saying that based on what has been previously adopted by the board, we are still looking at opportunities and methods to reduce projected or planned expenses for next year. And that includes a $60,000 reduction to our math purchase, as well as $230,000 in savings from our proposed budget for next year, which is savings that we had found, and as we alluded to earlier, in that 1.3 amount, that's part of that dollar amount that you're seeing that's already accounting for some of those reductions. So we still feel confident that we're able to do this with some additional restrictions on that funding, and making sure that we're not looking at this as we're making a choice of curriculum over our staff. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense.
Can I also just provide quick perspective that this purchase is slated at $113,000. It's a 6-year adoption for 3 grade levels. So if you were to equate that out, that's $6,800 per grade level per year for an English language arts curriculum that allows us to provide remote options for students and more relevant digital tools for staff and students.
And likely to Mr. Taylor's point, it would provide the district with incremental students that maybe we hadn't counted or budgeted on as well. Yes.
This specific curriculum adoption, I think, creates a relevance angle that could lead to that. I have a hard time completely adjusting a one-to-one relationship on that, Mr. Schwartz, but I appreciate that perspective from the standpoint that in order for us to remain not just competitive, but a compelling district that students would want to attend, and we're able to continue to deliver everything that we are known for and will continue to evolve as our system continues to improve continuously over time.
And doesn't this platform provide both innovation and agility?
I could defer that to Dr. Benton. My short answer would be yes.
Yes, it gives great flexibility for staff as well as students in terms of the utilization of the resources, but it also increases our professional development with how to use digital resources for our staff. The other thing is our prior adoption is from 2005. There have been 2 standard revisions since that time, 2 standards revisions that have increased the level of rigor significantly for our middle school students. And our middle school academic growth continues to stagnate below state expectations across the board. And so we feel that this tool will help in a variety of areas.
Will this get us current or allow us to do a little bit of leapfrogging?
It puts us current because it's obviously a current resource, but because it's digital, it allows for greater updates. And so it's not necessarily all print.
Which you can't innovate without the platform. This provides the platform.
It is a tool. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? All right, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, Ms. Namika, would you take the vote, please?
Mr. Clausen,
Aye.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch.
All right. I'd like to thank everyone for participating in the board meeting tonight. And as always, Ms. Namika, thank you for the great service you do for the district. And with that being said, we stand adjourned.
Good night.
All right.